Well, welcome back to Morning Express as we look to commence conversations tailored around headline stories. Our guest reviewer is the editor-in-chief of the Daily Courier newspaper. I like to refer to him as the ever-mercurial Seun Oni, who joins us virtually from the nation's capital this morning. Hello, good morning to Mr. Seun and welcome to the program.
Good morning, Mr. Brian. It's a delight to be here.
Well, good to see you, sir. Let's get your thoughts. A 7-day national mourning period has been declared by the federal government to honor former President Muhammadu Buhari. We're told that his remains are to arrive in Daura by noon today, and the interment rites begin at 2 p.m. So far, what do you make of the arrangements made by the federal government to honor his memory?
We are in such a mourning mood as a nation. Condolences to the immediate families of the late former military head of state and former president. Condolences to the entire political family and the nation at large. The enigma, like I love referring to him, is or was someone that will always polarize views in life. Views differ on his persona, his achievement, and what he actually stands for. And even in death, that was actually highly accentuated. Having said that, as someone who served in the military capacity as the former head of state and served for 8 years as a civilian head of state, a civilian president, I beg your pardon, it is just fit and proper that the nation also shows that it appreciated his service to the nation and, of course, his modest contributions in the area of infrastructure and in several areas. About the arrangement, I think there seems to be a bit of a clash. The initial arrangement between statutory state role and the religious role. You know, Islam quickly buries any deceased person as much as it is possible. But I'm aware the moment you want to give someone a state burial, it means a number of things have to be in place and it cannot be hurriedly cobbled together. So that was the reason for the shift of the burial from Monday to Tuesday. But all said and done, we're looking forward to it. I think his corpse will arrive Nigeria a few hours from now. And later in the evening, I learned he'll be interred in Daura. And it's actually a history that no one will forget in the country. Whether some of us who are much younger, in when he took his first reign, early 80s to mid 80s, and now that he ruled for 8 years, like I said, his life, his achievement would always be polarized. But that is left for history to judge whether he has done well or he has not.
Now, we also heard reports that there was a delay in the movement of his corpse over what was now reported as some documentation hurdles. Now, he passed on in London. It has also triggered a lot of reactions from Nigerians on why this is so. We remember the likes of African leaders, to include the late Nelson Mandela, who chose to die in his country-owned hospital. That's against dying abroad. How did this shape up the narratives ahead of his burial?
I heard that, but from the background of the information that is available in the public domain, his visit to London was not as critical as many people had painted it. I saw a video of his movement from Daura to Kaduna and eventually to the UK, and he was not critically ill. It was just a regular checkup. You must also not forget that none of us actually owns our lives, and no one can actually say when it will be the last day. This same Buhari, for close to 2 years, was critically ill, and he returned back ill and healthy. And so it's neither here nor there. But I must be very emphatic that it really did not speak well of our leaders and the nation. If, for instance, we have a president who governed for 8 years, if you aggregate his military and that you are talking about a decade, sitting in the helms of affairs, presiding over the destiny of a nation like Nigeria, and there is no decent hospital to take care of him till his last day. I think that raises a lot of questions. But if you place that also side by side with the fact that when it comes to medical issues, we always have this preference for places where they have our history. All right. For instance, I gave birth to the three of my children in the same hospital, not because the hospital was very close, not because, but just I had experiences elsewhere, and I was just always at home in that hospital. So anytime it was time for my wife delivery, we always choose that place. So there are a number of dynamics, but I must be very clear, it really did not speak well of us as a nation if the choicest hospitals for us are outside the shores of our nation, which of course has become the pastime of all our leaders without exception. You hear our leaders have headache and they're in the US. Of course, the videos also showed a former head of state who was with him, and he claimed that he also was a patient in the same hospital. I think that's very bad, and the person who is sitting on the saddle today must do something differently to ensure that we have at least decent hospitals where our leaders can be taken care of the same way with the generality of the citizenry.
Well, quite unfortunately, he joins the likes of Robert Mugabe, Sam Lugungu, who also passed away in foreign hospitals as African leaders. But coming back to the issue on ground, with the burial set for today, there has been a postponement of the earlier agreed upon special FEC meeting. Today has also been declared a public holiday with flags to be flown at half-mast. Many talk about the reconvening of that FEC meeting for Friday. What do you suspect will be top on the agenda following such a specially convened Federal Executive Council meeting?
I think that FEC likely will be ceremonial. It will just be a time of reminiscing over the lives and times, of course, his achievements while in the saddle. You expect past head of state to be present, and of course, if you now begin to look at the roll call of our former head of state who are alive, I think virtually all of them will have one thing or the other to say about him, from Gowon to his predecessor in office, Goodluck Ebele Jonathan. There will be a whole lot to discuss about him, and that, of course, Nigerians and making speeches. It's going to take a few hours to get that off. Likely, that's what I expect. I don't expect any formal thing on that occasion. I expect leaders to talk about him, and we might just simply, as journalists, see statements that will make headlines on that day. But I really don't see anything formal. It's going to be likely ceremonial, reminiscing over the life and times of the late Enigma.
Now, you talked about a difference in opinion following his life and times. From one angle, many see him as an anti-corruption champion, following his war against indiscipline campaign whilst he was military head of states between 1983 to 1985. But in the latter part of his rule as civilian president, a number of his functionaries, particularly the former CBN governor Godwin Emefiele, is still being tried for corruption. How do we balance the conversations around his personality and line against corruption vis-a-vis the fact that a lot of alleged corruption was perpetrated under his nose?
That is, and that's a very interesting angle you are coming out from. I think this is my personal opinion about the late general. His persona, no doubt about it, he is not just pattern. I think his persona also speaks to one who is very rigid in his conviction. That's what history will leave many of us with. I was very interested in reading about his period as military head of state, and those are the things that further reinforces the things that reinforce my submission that he was not just pattern. He was someone who was very strong on his conviction. But let me borrow a leaf from what the Bishop of Sokoto Diocese, what he said is in popular, is an open source statement that when, for instance, you need to run the affairs of a church, maybe a bishop, a very holy person, and of course as Christians you know those requirements. Likely if you're a Christian, in the book of Timothy and in the book First Timothy and the book of Titus. But if you are a Muslim and you need, of course, someone to sit as the chief imam of a mosque, you also will not go and pick a drunkard by the wayside. You need somebody who is highly intellectually savvy, who is upright, righteous before Allah. But when it comes to what's it called, running the affairs of a nation, okay, why integrity, Spartan discipline, like I did mention, which are very great qualities of the late former President Muhammadu Buhari, they are not core requirements to preside over the affairs of a nation. Let me borrow the illustration of Bishop Hassan Kuka again. When you need to repair a car, of course you won't need a tongue-talking Christian to come and lay hands and repair a car that has broken down. And you will not need somebody who can recite all the Quran to come and speak to the car. You will need the skill set and intelligence of a mechanic. And so that's the difference. When it comes to presiding over a very diverse nation like Nigeria, I think the assumption we had prior to 2015, bearing in mind his military track record, we assumed that his Spartan discipline and strong conviction is all that is required to preside over Nigeria. Events after his 8-year stint had shown that we were all wrong. I was one of the people who felt he'll be able to do things differently, but 2015 to 2023 shows that he was really not fit for that because of the dynamics of a nation like Nigeria. For those 8 years, he kept true to his Spartan discipline and strong conviction, but sadly, he does not have that leadership, that rigorous leadership bench needed to oversee, needed to delegate and ensure that you get the needed result. He delegated which was a good skill set of leadership, but he was not able to follow through those delegations. So he was not a corrupt man. But unfortunately, after 8 years, we saw that he ran a government that was very corrupt, not because he was corrupt as a person, but because he does not have that leadership capacity to rein in those who came in to take advantage, hide under the shadow of his Spartan discipline and incorruptibility. And by the time they left there, we knew some of them who were barely average lawyers, but they left there becoming billionaires. We knew a number of them who came in just as modest individuals, and today they are one of the wealthiest people in Nigeria, not on account of their entrepreneurial skill set or industry, but because they pillaged our common patrimony and enriched themselves corruptly. And not just one, not two, I'm talking about tens of people who worked under him. It really also does not translate that they were not very good individuals who worked under him. They were very great individuals who served patriotically, who served quite excellently under him. But overall, remember that the buck also stops on the table of the president. So the legacy of that 8 years administration will not be remembered by those who stole dry under him. It will be remembered under the umbrella of this same enigma, Muhammadu Buhari. So that's a sad thing that history leaves us with.
Now, the federal government has urged Nigerians to honor an icon as we look to memorialize him. This call to honor him has not been honored by all Nigerians. Quite sadly, when you take to the streets of some parts of the country, there are much as public celebrations, which to me is unexplainable, celebrating the death of such a national icon. Whilst on the pages of certain social media platforms, you also find Nigerians saying things in the likes of Omoyele Sowore, things that are not too glorifying about him. How comes we're at this point in our national history when some Nigerians choose to, would I say it's unglorify the dead in some sorts?
Sadly, I was very unambiguous. I was quite unambiguous when I started my submission that we will always have diverse opinions about him. I have mine, and I've also read quite raving reviews of the late icon. Just this morning I read about the former Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Sadiat Farouk. I read the things she wrote about him, and of course it's not unexpected. I read what people like former Lagos Governor Babatunde Raji Fashola, and of course I've also been privileged to read what people like Samo Moseye wrote about him. In my own assessment of what he wrote about him, quite unprintable, but he's entitled to his opinion. We are in a democracy, and that's the nature of history. People will be left to deduce, to induce from the things you have done, the things you have not done. I will come very shortly to the lessons for us. But what the federal government asks us to do is not a legal thing. It's simply what we call a moral suasion. All right? You can morally persuade people. He has, if you bear in mind that he has spent majority of his adulthood, his active years in the service of Nigeria as a military leader, and 8 years later on, even before then, in between, he served in what do you call it? What we call the TETPON, PTDF. He served in PTDF, served in several other capacities as a statesman before coming back to be president. And so that alone is enough reason why you should honor and immortalize him. But having said that, there were negativities also, the negatives in his leadership, whether as military or you are looking at as a civilian head of state. And people should be allowed also to say what they think is their own assessment of this man. That is life. The lesson, like I did say earlier, is the fact that every one of us someday, Mr. Brian, when you are done, Some people will write things about you, good or bad. When I'm done, every one of us, people will have their fair assessment. So it beholds
I think it throws us back to the reality that once we are no more, what would be said about us? Now, much like his life was lived with the paradoxical interpretation by many Nigerians who followed him. One of those things was the fact that his involvement in certain military coups, even in the one that ousted the civilian government under Shehu Shagari, that finally brought him into power as a military head of state, which his stay was only for 2 years before General Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida also ousted him. Now, part of the things he did then as military head of state was Decree 2 and 4. Now, some see it as some sort of media oppression. Many years down the line, as civilian president, he was firmly remembered for the Twitter ban and the fact that his tweet was deleted for being perceived to be maliciously intended at a certain group of persons. Now, juxtaposing those two incidences whilst as military head of state and a civilian president, how do you view him in terms of his relationship with the media and his perception towards free speech?
Beautiful. His relationship with the media. During his military days, I think we should put it in context. We did not have any single military leader that had a decent relationship with the media. That should be put in context. So it was not just a Buhari issue. From the 62 days of Aguiyi Ironsi to the final days of Abdulsalami Abubakar, the reason why Abdulsalam was a bit more, let me say, not on the extreme, was because he had made up his mind that he was going to yield up power to civilian. So he was more or less preparing for days after Kaki. So that is understandable. So in context, we can just say that was true to military and kakistocracy at the time. But how about his democratic profile and antecedent? I would place, like I did say earlier, everything that happens in the administration of a president will be part of the legacy of that president. But I think we had people who served under him, who were supposed to be the guardian of his communication strategy. And I'm glad.
Are you talking about Lai Mohammed?
Yeah, I'm talking about people like Lai Mohammed, Femi Adesina, and Garba Shehu. And I was just about stating that just a few days ago, I heard someone like Garba Shehu was trying to say that he would have done better while he was a spokesperson. I heard him on a show. I was watching the show live.
But
when he
said, launch, Mr. Garba Shehu also said he fabricated the rat stories to cover up for President Muhammadu Buhari whilst he was in London. When you look at such statements, do you also think that it would have been a better way to handle publicity surrounding the president?
Yeah, that was exactly where I was trying to get to. That you see, when it comes to public communication, crisis management is the most difficult part of public communication. I think their crisis management mechanism was not thoroughly thought out. And that for me should be a study on its own. How the crisis management during that 8 years or those 8 years were not properly managed and what can be done differently. So I hope a postgraduate student will pick that and do a decent work so that those of us who are in that space, we can be better off. His crisis management was poorly managed. It was not properly done. First, the almost 2 years when he was sick, was not properly managed. He was left in the lodge, and even when he returned, so much was not really done to ensure that his relationship, especially with the media, who are the fourth estate of the realm, is adequately managed. What could have been done differently? I think what could have been done differently should have been not just the pace of releasing information, but the tendency to show all Nigerians that he is so empathic, because for the past few hours, some of the releases I've been reading from the closest people in his circle seems to now speak to a different person. So I got to a point I was wondering, is it just our African style of not speaking ill of the dead, or this is the true persona of this man? If it happens to be the true persona of this man, then those who manage his image, who manage his communication strategy during his 8 years as a Democrat, really, in my opinion, did not do well enough.
Now, Mr. Seun, talking about that Twitter ban again, and the perceived anti-hate speech campaign which gained prominence under his time as president, do you think that could have been better managed as well? Because remember, Twitter had to be taken down for a while in Nigeria following the decision to delete that said tweet of President Muhammadu Buhari.
Yeah, you see the same thing I'm trying to say. That was a crisis at the time. And the crisis then, all right, because I think the mistake ab initio was that they underestimated the clout of Twitter. And for me, if you are in the communication space, you should know that was unpardonable. That was the most active threat for the Gen Z obeying Nigerians. Twitter has the highest number of people, but when it comes to activity where public opinions usually gain public traction, is actually Twitter. Even up till now, is Twitter, not on Facebook. So to not have a back channel discussion first before just shutting it down is actually a serious wrong step in crisis management, because they would definitely the impact will ripple, knowing that is a place for public discourse. So it was supposed to be a back channel thing that maybe months or even years later we would have been hearing that the Buhari government reached out to Twitter threatening to do this and do that. That's back channel. But the first thing they did was that to wade the long stick, and it was the effect, it was the pushback by citizenry that now made them to quickly go back and start using back channel. So what they should start with was what they were ending with, and that in crisis management is totally wrong. About the bill that was pushed during his time, it was also part of the mismanagement, because it was actually a lawmaker who pushed it first, all right, but the narrative that was painted make it look as if it was an executive bill, and it was not an executive bill initially. It's still part of the crisis mismanagement. So that's why I said they ought to have done better, because he simply casted a man in a bad light, a man who was always after the media, who did not want to give any space for any dissent in a democracy, and that was not good enough on his image.
Now, the late president will also be famously remembered for a number of quotes. We'll start with the one following his inauguration as the 15th president and the 4th president following the 4th Republic in 2015, where he said, "I belong to everybody, I belong to nobody," citing that he is more pan-Nigerian. Now, down the line, he's been criticized for appointments along the lines of nepotism. Do you see a case where that famous quote did not translate in his appointments, which ought to have been based on federal character principle?
Well, it depends on how we actually want to see that statement. I belong to nobody and I belong to everybody. Eventually, for his 8 years, I think it was true to his nature. The appointment clearly shows that he belongs to some people. His relationship across and his statement, for instance, we saw throughout his 8 years, his position on the farmer headers clashes was one of the most toxic things about his administration. And he took to his guns, even when it was obvious that the headers were now taking advantage of his posturing. He did not yield ground throughout his 8 years. So he was actually for some people. If you also look at the way and manner he prosecuted the terrorism war, there were on many occasions when even foreign media were very clear that when you are prosecuting something of this nature, the toppest echelon of the military, it gets to a time they might get fatigued. So all you needed to do was to rejig, pull out some of the leadership so that they can be better refined. There'll be innovation, there'll be new ideas. But we saw what he did. It was for those guys. He kept them even when there was no serious progress in that light. He stuck to them. And so those are the things that really shows us his persona. And that's why I said earlier, he has a Spartan discipline and he had a very strong conviction. When he holds to, when he believes in something, I think he has serious issue yielding to other dissenting opinion. And for me, it can be a strength in some areas, but not when you are leading a diverse country like Nigeria. And so those are some of the things that history will continue to remember former President Muhammadu Buhari for, sadly.
Now, another famous quote was one targeted at something a lot of persons say is our strength as the most populous black nation, which is our youth and potential for growth. He famously said, Nigerian youths are lazy. It, at the time, garnered a lot of reactions and backlash on social media and across the international space as well. Many perceived it from the angle of demarketing the potentials of Nigerian youths. I know many years down the line he famously apologized, but how do you weigh that statement at the time and the damage control that followed?
He apologized, and so that simply tells us that it doesn't matter how we want to waive it. That statement was the wrong thing to say, not because it was he did say any right thing. No, it doesn't matter how you want to weigh it. You don't use. I have someone who loves saying that it's actually mischievous to estray a person or a group of persons from the prism of just a few who are not doing well, and that was exactly and now generalize from the prism of a few who are not doing well. Do we have young Nigerians who are into advanced fee fraud? Yes, we do. Do we have young Nigerians who are unemployed and are not willing to work? Yes, we do. But if you look at the fact that the population of Nigerian youth is almost 70% of the population, and we have majority of Nigerians very industrious across various fields in the world, and if you also bear in mind that the so-called unemployed Nigerians here, the moment they travel out of the shores of the country, US, UK, Canada, and other parts of the world, they become one of the most sought after people in those climes. Tells you that definitely Nigerian youths are not lazy from the use of that word. But he said that he apologized, and events that follow also did not help matters. Because one of the things we expect someone of his towering stature, who had been privileged at that his age when he was in power, and I'm saying this very boldly, I also think that the incumbent must learn from there. If you are privileged, you are past 70, and you are ruling over a country that has almost 70% of its population below 40 years, then you must be very intentional about reproducing a new set of leadership. We did not see that much in his administration. And this administration, sadly, is also toying that path. We need to see more younger people in the administration. We need to see younger people sitting at the table. You want to see structures that clearly, and you might see anything you want to say about the late President Buhari, but programs like Empower, where a large chunk of youths were taken off the street, at least to give them something monthly. This administration had actually not continued that. It was under the guise that they were auditing, what's it called, the Ministry
of Humanitarian Affairs.
Because of the rot under the immediate minister, Beta Edu. But up to now, more than a year later, we've not seen any serious progress. Those guys who were benefiting some things at the time, they have not benefited. And I wasn't surprised a fortnight ago when the World Bank told the federal government that in spite of the appreciable progress in both his monetary and fiscal policy, he is actually not doing well in terms of reaching out to the most vulnerable in the society. And if the predominant population of the country are youth populated, it means a chunk of the vulnerable people will also come from that population. So in effect, what I'm trying to say is that the comment by the former president, the late president, is actually an indictment on his inaction. And the current administration also must not toil that path.
Now, let's talk a little about his disposition to the rule of law. A lot of persons accuse him for being a president who had no regard for the rule of law. This wasn't made any easier by his decision to suspend the Chief Justice of Nigeria at the time, Justice Walter Onnoghen. Unprecedented, never seen in the history of Nigeria before. When we discuss about him in passing, based on his position to respect for the rule of law and that unceremonious suspension of the CJN at the time, in your opinion, how would he be remembered?
Well, in my opinion, I won't use one event to make a summation on his legacy when it comes to his regards for the rule of law.
There are more than one event in that respect. Can I remind you about the court's ruling on Nnamdi Kanu, the court ruling on El Zazaki as well at the time, and even the decisions to go against such court rulings are beyond one decision to also suspend the CJN. This further encompasses his relationship with the judiciary.
Okay, I think we are saying the same thing. That I will also want to reel out other things during his administration.
I didn't get you on that point. Why not?
Yeah. That was what I was trying to say. But are we really surprised? No, because of his track record during his military days. Some things are easier said than done. You know, we saw that. And since we are looking at his legacy as a leader, those will always be in history books that to a large extent, he really did not submit to the full dictate of the rule of law. And it's unsurprising. For instance, you mentioned the Ezazaki issue, but also to add to that many lives were lost from those Shiite movement in their face-off with the military in the Zaria part of Kaduna State. And unfortunately, it was because of his posture. It was clearly because of his posture. We must also not forget that it was during his days that the popular Lekki toll gate happened. Why events after that had shown that they used the verbiage massacre never happened, but it was clearly true that peaceful protest was actually quelled in an overbearing manner. That has been clearly proven, even though massacre has not been proven, because to have a massacre means you have lots of lives lost, but we did not have that from the proofs. But forceful repression was used to quell what was supposed to be a peaceful protest, and it quickly escalated and led to huge loss, especially for Lagos State and a few other states where the protests took place. So these are a number of things that really show that even though he tried to show us that he had opt his military khaki, he still has that tendency to be a bit dictatorial and not yield to the rule of law, even when he was putting on agbada as a civilian president.
Now, in closing, before we talk about the National Assembly's choice of a one-week recess to honor his memory, let's talk about some high points of his nature as a person. He will be famously dubbed in Hausa as Megaskia, being the honest one, and he also became famous as the Say Baba campaign, endorsed him as an elder who stood by some tenable principles. We saw infrastructural growth under him. We saw the implementation of the PIA gain prominence. We also saw massive electoral reforms in 2022, all credited to him. In terms of some of the life-changing decisions his time in power brought about, what would you say encapsulated it the most?
For me, the Buhari's 8 years administration can best be described as one that fought largely to reverse our decaying infrastructure. I think for me, that is one that nobody, and I say nobody, can dispute that. His infrastructural trail was unparalleled, and now leaves this administration to do much more in order to either beat the record or at least do something very close to that. I will leave other arguments at what cost, loans from China and the rest of them. But for instance, the real revolution happened under his watch. So we will remember him for that. Comically, yesterday I just sat down, and when I was done from the office, I did not drive to the office yesterday. So a colleague just told me we live in the same part of Abuja in Kubwa. So he said, "Oh, are you going?" So I said, "Yes, I'm going, but I'm waiting for one of our colleagues to follow him so that he can drop me close to my place." So he said, "Wow, he came with rail, and that for about a month he's been actually shuttling rail." So I was trying to ask what's the cost. So he said it's actually free. That for almost a year it's been free. And I said, "Wow, that's not always in the news." Thanks to Buhari. So I joined rail yesterday from the city center to Kubwa. It was free. I had a very eventful ride, AC tight, watched the scenery across the FCT. So those are legacies. You might say anything you want to say about Buhari, but that's a legacy he has led for us. People Lagos to Ibadan are celebrating the same thing, and other parts of. So I just hope this government will pick up from where he stopped and also build on that. So all said and done, he will be a president that actually reversed our infrastructural decay. So that's one legacy he left for us as a country.
Now, in closing, before I let you go, the last thing we'll touch on is the National Assembly's decision to go on a one-week recess. They are to reconvene on the 22nd of July. Now, the statement by the clerk of the National Assembly says this decision is to honor the memory of President Muhammadu Buhari. It has been greeted by mixed reactions from some Nigerians who think that 1 week might not be the best decision to have been taken. Do we quantify this in terms of the 1 week, in terms of 7 days? We know sitting basically 2 days, but all other legislative activities have been suspended as well.
Well, I think statutorily, when the National Assembly loses its members, whether the Green Chamber or the Red Chamber, statutorily what happens is that the sitting for that day or any day they get the information is usually shelved. If they are already sitting before the news filters in, the next legislative day is usually a break for them. That is their custom in the National Assembly. But to now declare 1 week, I really don't know what informed that. But I just know that as a people, sometimes we can be a bit very emotional, and it impacts on what we do. But I think the jury is out. Majority of Nigerians really don't think 1 week is necessary for mourning him. But I think customarily, whenever the National Assembly loses its members, they usually declare a day. But in this case, the entire 5 working days, which equals to the legislative week, well, I really don't know what informed that. But you remember, we have set the record. This man spent his entire adult life serving Nigeria, first as a military head of state and later as a civilian president. He has paid his dues. The records, the history, the narratives certainly can't be the same. But whatsoever you want to say, he was a former leader of this country. He has paid his dues. He has his plus, he has his minus. And like every human being, like myself, like you in the studio, and all our viewers at home, we have our plus, we have our negatives, and history will judge us whether we have done a bit or not. I think that's where we leave it.
It's a fine place to leave it, Mr. Seun Oni. I must thank you for your objectivity to this discourse. And also the question posed to everyone watching this is famously, what would you be remembered for when you are no more? Mr. Seun, enjoy the best of your day.
Thank you so much. Always a delight being on the show. Thank you so much.